Welcome to Outside Views. Today we continue our exploration of what a UK application for EU membership would actually involve if it ever comes. This is not a rejoin, there is no automatic way back, there's only the accession process. And as we have discussed before, this process is the same for every country that applies. And today we are covering chapter 25, Science and Research. And this chapter may seem less controversial compared to other areas of the accession process, but it is absolutely crucial. Science and research drive innovation, they drive economic growth and technological development. And the EU has some of the world's most advanced research programs, and full participation in them is a key advantage of EU membership. For the UK, joining the system, once again, would be both beneficial and complex. So what does this chapter actually cover? Unlike many other chapters of the acquis, the field of science and research does not require the transposition of EU law into national legislation. Instead, the focus is on ensuring that a candidate country has the capacity to effectively participate in the EU's framework programs for research and technological development. And this means having the necessary institutions, policies, and human resources in place to collaborate in EU-funded research projects. The EU's flagship research initiative is Horizon Europe. Horizon Europe is one of the world's largest research and innovation programs, with a budget of over 95 billion euros for the period 2021 to 27. It funds groundbreaking research, international collaborations, and the development of new technologies across multiple sectors, from health and climate science to artificial intelligence and space exploration. Before Brexit, the UK was a major player in EU-funded research projects. British universities and research institutions were among the top recipients of Horizon 2020 funding, the predecessor of Horizon Europe. The UK's departure from the EU, however, significantly disrupted this collaboration. Post-Brexit, the UK initially lost access to Horizon Europe. Negotiations between the UK and the EU over continued participation were difficult and politically charged. Eventually, an agreement was reached in 2023, allowing the UK to associate with Horizon Europe as a third country participant. However, this associated status does not grant the same level of influence as full EU membership. UK researchers are now excluded from certain governance decisions and high-priority strategic projects. Full EU membership would allow the UK to return to a leading role in European research and regain access to all aspects of Horizon Europe and future programs. The UK would also need to demonstrate its administrative capacity to manage and implement EU-funded research programs effectively. And this means ensuring that universities, research institutions, and government agencies are fully integrated into the EU's research ecosystem. It also means aligning national research funding mechanisms with EU priorities. Currently, the UK government has launched its own funding programs, such as the UK Research and Innovation Body, to compensate for the loss of direct EU funding. Joining the EU again would require reintegration into the EU funding system and the restructuring of domestic programs to align with EU priorities. Another key aspect of this chapter is mobility and researcher collaboration. One of the major benefits of EU research programs is the ability for scientists and researchers to collaborate across borders without bureaucratic restrictions. Before Brexit, British universities attracted top talent from across Europe. The end of free movement has created significant barriers for researchers, making it difficult for EU scientists to work in the UK and, of course, vice versa. If the UK were to reapply for EU membership, it would need to reinstate full freedom of movement for research and academic professionals, not only for them, but for them too. And this would help to restore the UK's position as a global leader in scientific collaboration and ensure that British institutions could fully participate in EU research initiatives without restrictions. Beyond funding and collaboration, science and research also rely on regulatory alignment. Many EU-funded research projects require common standards in areas such as data protection, medical research ethics, and environmental impact assessments. Post-Brexit, the UK has started to diverge from some of these regulatory frameworks. And if the UK were to join the EU again, it would need to bring its regulations back into full alignment with EU directives. And this would affect everything from pharmaceutical research to artificial intelligence development. Another key factor is industrial cooperation. EU research funding is often linked to broader industrial strategies, including space exploration, green energy, and digital transformation. The UK has historically been a key player in many of these areas, particularly in aerospace and biomedical research. Joining the EU again would open the door to new industrial partnerships and allow UK companies to take part in EU-funded technological innovation initiatives. Without EU membership, the UK remains a third country participant, which limits the ability of British companies to lead major EU-backed research projects. And this brings us to the broader question of EU accession. Joining the EU again is not a simple return. It's an entirely new application process. And that process is governed by the so-called Copenhagen criteria. And these criteria set the fundamental requirements for any country seeking EU membership. A candidate country must demonstrate stable institutions, guaranteeing democracy, the rule of law, human rights, and protections for minorities. It must have a functioning market economy capable of handling the competitive pressures of the EU. And it must show the ability to adopt and enforce the full body of EU law, including participation in science and research programs. And many people think of negotiations as two sides bargaining over terms. But EU accession is not that. It's a process of compliance. The EU does not lower its standards for new members. It's the applicant that must meet those standards. And the UK, if it ever were to apply, would not receive special treatment. It would go through the same 35-chapter process as any other applicant. And science and research is just one of these chapters and probably the easiest. Failure to comply means failure to progress in the accession process. And that is why it's so long and rigorous. No cherry picking here. So, rejoining the EU means fully aligning with EU research funding mechanisms, reinstating freedom of movement for researchers, and ensuring that British institutions meet EU research standards. I'm quite sure not too many have seen the chapter so far, but there will be more until we reach the 35. And as you can hear, my voice really suffered recently. So that brings me to the point where I will tell you, if you want to see another video, the next one is right here in the end screen.